sort of reception. But it's funny, you know. We are facing something that is what it pretends to oppose, and that is a new fascism outside this door that's unfortunately Melbourne today. These are the people that have been attacking a number of other protests. We had to cancel the launch of my own book in Melbourne because police warned us not only were they going to be out in force, but they could only supply 1, 2 or 3 policemen to defend us. And this was the protest had been advertised around the country, around the city, with posters. And the reason they could only supply 1, 2 or 3 police to defend us was that they were busy with a massive police operation to provide security at the South Sudanese beauty pageant, which every year is an invitation to extreme violence. We've seen, I think, 3 of those annual pageants descend into mass violence, which is sort of a picture of where Victorians are today. Sort of reported a threat. Last night there was another attack by a refugee. 2 or 3 weeks after the ASIO boss told us there is no connection between refugees and terrorism, it didn't take 3 weeks before we got yet another attack. That's 4 attacks in a row by Muslim refugees. And meanwhile, if you try to point this out, you face violence in the streets by people who are actually against the sort of freedoms that we would need to protect ourselves. You don't have free speech. You can't speak your mind. You can't defend your other freedoms either, can you? And it works into Steve's book because we also saw with Donald Trump. Trump accused of crimes that, and sins and evils, that the people protesting against him were more guilty than anyone of committing. So they would accuse him of stirring up violence when they in fact infiltrated his protests to commit violence and used violence to try to shut some of his rallies down. And some were actually cancelled as a result of the violence. They accused him of violence, but were violent themselves, and more directly than he. They accused him of inciting racist violence, and this is in a country where, in fact, the Black Lives Matter movement incited, held a protest where 5 police officers were all killed, racist crimes. Trump was, in fact, a sort of change agent. Steve saw this, and from the start, it's really interesting how the sort of rise and declaration Trump occurred while Steve was there, and he's followed it in his blog posts through it, and it's been quite staunch there. He attacks me in this book of for being a fair weather conservative or something. I can't remember the phrase. Sunshine conservative. Sunshine conservative. For pointing out that Trump is a liar, a buffoon, a braggart, a sexist, all that kind of stuff. And he is. He is. I also thought he was going to lose, but then so did you, Steve. At moments, but you kept the faith. My point is that 2 things there. One is, what does it say about American politics and the dissatisfaction with the ruling elite, the swamp, that a liar and braggart and buffoon and sexist and whatever is the man in which so much hope has been vested. I don't believe that many voters in America were in any doubt about the failings of Donald Trump, and they voted for him anyway. And that's not an indictment of the taste of the American voter. I think it's an indictment of the political class, that people would seek in such a man their salvation. And I think Steve has seen it from, well, yes, he's seen it from the start. The other point of that is, he is, for all that, the thing about Trump is, he's one of those people, to me, a bit like Pauline Hanson. I was telling him this shortly, but this is one aspect of it, where what is done to him and what is said of him is in some ways more important than what he himself says and does, and more defining. So the vilification, the violence against him, the attempts to shut him down, the attempts to deny him media space, and now the deliberate, illegal, constant leaking from the intelligence services against him. This is a scandal that's been done. It's a national security scandal. It is a threat to democracy, and it's done constantly without the media calling it out by enough. Those things are so important, and that is the importance of Donald Trump, that he stands against this. And so whether you hold your nose or whether you embrace him willingly or whatever, it is so vital that he succeed. So far, on two extremely important issues, he could almost do nothing else but these two, and he's already proved in some ways his worth. Obviously, the pick for the Supreme Court. That's a legacy, and a very good pick. But second, of course, is pulling out of the Paris Agreement. That's calling a bluff, calling time on a scam. It's setting free a lot of people who'd like to say something without finding out an excuse, including our own liberal. Sorry, I don't hate people who do that, but it really needs to be done. I don't want you to mistake me thinking it is a liberal government, but I think a liberal government now voices saying, hey, listen, maybe we should pull out too, which of course we should. So from those points of view, it is so important that Trump win. Of course, we can't play the tribal politics of the left. Well, I don't think we can. It's not my man, right or wrong. You know, you have to say, I don't stand for this, I don't stand for that. You have to disown what's not good. But I think it's even more important when you do that, which conservatives who tend to be individualists, not tribalists, tend to do. We acknowledge the failings, but then it's even more important that you praise the strengths, identify the strengths, support the strengths. So yeah, he is a braggart, he is a liar, I know that. Even more important is this and this and this and this. That's the argument you need to have. And of course you also need to know that the forces arraigned against him are not pure. It is in many ways almost like a last gasp of, not quite America being America, it's pretty strong, but to many around the West, it almost seems like a last gasp of Western civilization crying against the forces pushing it to destruction. When you think, you know, we have here imported the threat, and then put up laws to make it almost impossible to express a dissent from what's happened and to describe what's happened without risk of being sued or physically attacked. This is poor. This is very sad. When we have a liberal government that has adopted the Labor agenda on economics, high taxes, high spending, that in the papers we now see it's adopted, is on the brink of adopting a global warming policy that Labor says it can finally adopt to and then end, that's the word that Bill Shorten said, end the war on global warming between them. When you see Malcolm Turnbull clearly edging for the excuse, the opportunity to endorse Labor-like social policies as well, whether you're for them or against them, I'm just describing the pattern. When you see Julie Bishop appointing a committee to better enforce United Nations treaties on our business leaders in the field of human rights, can you believe that? And appointing Jenny George, former Labor member, former ACTU president, to help advise her on what better to do. You realise we do not have a Liberal government anymore. We do not have a party that's got the stomach for a fight. We do not have Donald Trump. And for that reason, I mean, but Donald Trump's almost like a surrogate for our own battles here, at least somewhat. And that's what I find, you know. Protests like the one outside hope by punishing someone symbolic or prominent, they'll silence the rest, intimidate the rest.